All right. So normally when I start a recording, I tell you the inspiration behind it or what made me start thinking about it. And I don't really remember for this one. So I want to talk to you about something that I'm still working out through my head. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what the different phases are, but we're going to talk about parenting today. I want to talk about your parenting style. Now, a few disclaimers. I am not a psychologist, even though I'm minored in psychology. I am not a parenting expert, even though I'm a mom of three. But I just wanted to talk about your the different parenting styles and what causes that. So I know there are a couple different parenting styles, like there's a helicopter parent, and then there's kind of like the free range chill parent. And it's funny because whenever I go to the park with my friends, they'll be like, hey, bro, do you want to meet up and go to the park for a play date with the kids? And I'm like, yes. And to me, what that translates to is that's mommy time. My kids are within a distance that I can see them. I have those eagle eyes. And that means my friend and I are on a bench and we're talking and we're watching our kids play. But for some of my friends, that means we're actually going on a play date where we're by the slides and we're with the kids. So it's always interesting to navigate that because for me, I'm like, yeah, me time. I get to hang out with one of my favorite people while my kids have fun. And for some friends, that means, okay, I'm going to be following my kid around the park because they may run away. So that helicopter parenting is that one where there's a lot of intervention in the child's life. And it's usually from a good place, like they want to make sure that the child is not harming themselves or gets into harm's way or that they are not pretty failing, right? So a helicopter parent may like choose the words for their kids, tell them what to say, give them a bunch of language, give them a bunch of steps. And again, it's well meaning. They're highly involved in their children's lives and their decision making, even the problem solving. So maybe they don't give them a chance to feel because they're like, okay, let's quickly run into problem solving. And that is great because they give them language, they give them tools and resources. But obviously, like anything else, there's the flip side where it may be to the detriment of the child because they don't build their self-confidence from I did it, I figured it out, and they don't really get that independence. Now, the contrast to that, that's parents like me, where my sister, who is a girl mom, one of my sisters, who's a girl mom, will say, oh my gosh, my heart was in my mouth. Why do you have your kids standing so close to the edge? And I'm like, I already calculated in my head. If we're at a lake, well, not a lake, if we're at a pond and I know the pond is yay high, that if my kid falls in, it's at their ankle, I think they're going to be okay. And I'm still, giving them guidelines like don't go too close, don't do this. But her barometer or her margin may be a little bit further back for her comfort level. So I always think it's fun when I go to places with different people and how they react. This style kind of encourages that self-reliance and allowing them to develop their problem solving skills and their judgment as well, versus me constantly discerning for them. And again, it's calculated risk. If they go on the playground and they run too fast, they're going to fall and they're going to realize next time they don't need to do that, right? So it's a different style, and I completely get that. But what I really, really want to talk about is what's driving that. So obviously, our upbringing and how we were raised is going to make an impact on how we raise our kids. For some people, it may be I had the best childhood ever. I'm going to do exactly what my mom did, what my dad did, and that's how I want to raise my child. For other people, it's I did not enjoy my childhood, and I'm going to compensate for everything that went wrong, and I'm going to go the complete opposite direction, and that's how I'm going to raise my child. So those experiences help you determine whether you want to replicate certain areas of your childhood or whether you want to completely adopt different approaches. And then obviously there are cultural and societal influences. I was at the science center the other day with my boys. Again, my boys were like off to one side doing something, and I was on a bench sitting with my baby, putting him to sleep. And I saw a teacher talking to a kid, and there was this big blow up. The child was obviously having a bad day, having a meltdown, and then the teacher is just like exercising authority. I'm the adult. I'm this and that and that. And like from a Jamaican, I'm like, yeah, 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 that's how you do it. But when you look at the child, you realize this was not their desire to be disrespectful. This was, I have all these big emotions and I have no idea what to do with them. But then they're escalating the issue and then yelling at the kid to calm down. And I'm like, two wrongs don't make a right. Like even me with my tough parenting style can see that. And obviously, there were three teachers. One realized that I was kind of like taking in what was going on. And then when the other two walked away, he said, I'm glad I'm not their parent. And I was like, you are until 3 p.m., right? Like, you're not the person's mom or dad, but when you're a teacher, you're entrusted for the amount of time that they're with you. And then you saying that in front of the child, I'm sure that doesn't make them feel any better. So I called the kid over. This is going a completely different direction. I was not planning to share this story. But anyways, I called the kid over and I was like, what's going on? And then they explained what was going on. And then the teacher was able to kind of like see a different side. And it's not that I want children to um, usurp an adult's authority, but I feel that everyone has a place and children are individuals, right? So in this situation, I just felt like it was so poorly handled. And I was like, thank you, God, that my kids are with me. Because a lot of times it's not just the peer-to-peer influence, it's like teachers bully kids too. And I have a bunch of friends who are teachers and they're the most amazing people, right? I would totally entrust them with my kids. Unfortunately, they live too far. But there are multiple dynamics. But again, that's not where I wanted to go with this. Where I wanted to go was in addition to our own personal experiences, culture, society, even the child's temperament and their needs, our goals, our values, external pressures like, in-laws saying something about how you raise your kid, um, peer influence, like how your friends raise their kids, there's a complex interplay of like personal, cultural, social, and all these different factors in how we raise our children, even in the environment. If you live in the suburbs, maybe you can send your kid out and say, go play, because as you're in the kitchen, they can go as far as they want into the woods or the grass because you can see them and it's safe. Maybe a dare may come, but they're safe from people. If you live in an urban setting, you have to be concerned about them crossing the streets. You're not going to be as you know, lenient and just like, oh yeah, go spread your wings, go explore. Obviously, you can like hold a child's hand and say, hey, wait, not yet, and teach them a little bit more to deal with their surroundings. Enough said about that. What I realized with parenting is that, and again, I'm not a psychologist, so this may not be a complete list or even a list on anybody's research paper, but I've realized three factors that influence our parenting. And one of those is trauma. So I shared that, if you had a situation that you did not enjoy, that trauma may translate into how you parent, whether you replicate certain things because hurt people, or whether you completely adapt a different approach because you're like, I will never let my child go through that. So trauma is one thing that really influences how you parent. The second thing I realized is fear. Like I heard a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't want to mess up my child," and then they tend to coddle, or if there is a situation that they can't control, they tend to overcompensate, right? Not realizing that an extra candy, an extra cookie, extra screen time, extra tangible or intangible thing is not going to compensate for a void. If your child is missing a parent who is on a work trip or something dire has happened to them, there is no amount of sugar that's going to compensate for that. So a lot of times we have fear-based parenting where we're like, I'm so afraid that this will happen, and to compensate for that I'm going to do this, or I don't want my child to experience the hurt and harm that I did, so I'm going to be lighthearted and make everything a happy moment, or whenever there's a potential that they're going to experience disappointment, I'm going to quickly usurp that or quickly redirect them. Those two, fear and trauma, while I understand why it's possibly done, I never want to justify it because it's not coming from a wholesome place. And I'm sure there are like 10 other ways or reasons or factors of how people parent. But the third one I want to talk about is the one that I pray that I lean into, and that's God-centered parenting. I never want to parent from a place of fear. Like, I'm so afraid this thing will happen to my child. Let me become this helicopter parent, or let me cover them and coddle them. I never want to parent from a place of trauma where, this happened to that person, or this happened to me, or this happened to my spouse. So I want to make sure that that never happens. And again, the motivation is always what's going on in your heart. It's one thing to do something out of love. It's one thing to do something out of common sense. It's one thing to do something out of good parenting. But if you're doing something because of fear or trauma, then we have to reevaluate what we're doing. So, like, what does this God centered parenting look like? Teaching your children the tools that they need, training up your children in the way that they should go, teaching them to have a relationship with God so that they don't always have to depend on your relationship, right? Like, I remember hearing a testimony of someone in the military, and they talked about how they had a praying grandmother. And that's beautiful. And they said that their grandmother used to pray Psalms 91 over them, and they felt like there was Psalms 91 equipped when they were in battle and when all these things were happening to them in war zones. But what would it look like if this individual had their own relationship with God? What would it look like if I raised my children and I modeled certain things where eventually I don't have to say, remember to say your grace, remember to pray in the morning, remember to pray before you go to bed. Now, granted, we train the child, so there are times when we're going to be doing this constantly, continually. But what would it look like when they see us modeling it and they start to do it on their own? Not just to please us, but because they have a desire, because they have a relationship, because this has become second nature to them. So this may be another podcast as I continue to think about it, or another YouTube show as I continue to get more revelation. But the three that I've been thinking about are fear, trauma, and God-centered parenting. And I really want to just do a deep dive into making sure my kids have everything that they need to live a life of godliness. The fruits of the Spirit, understanding these powerful stories and the implications, the practical implications, right? So it's one thing to teach your kids about Daniel in the lion's den, but what does that mean in a practical environment? Because unless they go to the zoo or the safari, they're probably not going to be in a lion's den. But what was the point of that story? Are we teaching them to stand up for what they believe? Are we teaching them that even when it doesn't look right, God is still in the midst of the situation with them? Are we teaching them that they never fight alone because Jesus is always with them? Like, what are we teaching them? Right? So that is my goal. And I hope you will do a little reflection, do a little introspection, and say, what is the motivation for my parenting? Am I parenting from a place of hurt, from fear, from trauma, from media or social influence, from my professional background? Because I have this degree in psychology and I have this degree in education, and it says you should do this for social emotional learning, you should do this for the psychological benefit. And even though I'm kind of mocking, there is benefit in a lot of things, but what is the root cause? What is the goal? What is the outcome? Am I parenting from a place of the external pressure or the stressors that I'm facing? Am I parenting to just give my kids flexibility and autonomy without giving them the tools that they need to have these powerful positions, right? Because that's another thing. Like, I remember talking to a friend and she was saying how, as a Caribbean woman, she was not able to have a voice. So now she gives her kids a voice. And that's great, except I would never ask my 11-month-old to lift a table because it's too heavy for them. So when you give a child something that's too big for them without giving them the tools and the resources and a concept for how it's supposed to be used, you're just creating a monster. So what you're doing from a quote unquote great place or positive motive actually ricochets or backfires. So how you like me now? So that's it. What is the motivation for your parenting, and what does God-centered parenting look like in your life? And what have you been doing that it's clear that you're not doing from a place of love and God-centered intentions? Alrighty, that is it. What is your parenting style? Let me know.